This week on the Communicators, a discussion with Michael Copps, the current chairman of the Federal Communications Commission.
And we are pleased this week on the Communicators to have the acting chairman of the Federal Communications Commission, Michael Copps, as our guest. Chairman Copps, thank you for being here. Joining in the questioning is Fawn Johnson of Dow Jones Newswire. Chairman Copps, if I could start with referring back to a speech you gave recently. You said in that speech that you didn't want to return to the old argument of regulation versus deregulation when it comes to telecom policy, yet in the same speech you criticized what you termed to be 2 decades of mindless deregulation and talked about how right now there is a possible era of reform much like the New Deal. Are those two statements contradictory?
No, all I'm trying to do is say we need to get away from that ideological path that we've been going down, and every issue is put into these categories. Is it regulatory or deregulatory? And so often you lose mind of the substance of the issue, you lose track of it, can't figure out what the really core questions are that you ought to be addressing. Yes, I do think we went through excessive years of mindless deregulation emanating from that philosophy a little bit that we were just talking about, and I think the public interest suffered. With regard to the media, I think there was an unfortunate combination of that kind of deregulating away all the public interest guidelines that we used to have, accompanied by the tsunami of media consolidation that we went through in the 90s and after that. And you put those two things together, and I think it had some unfortunate effects. Now, as I say, I think there is a little window of reform open, but that doesn't mean reform equals regulation. It means reform equals reform. It means we're going to try to look at the substance of an issue. The question facing us with regard to media is how do you safeguard and protect the public interest in this new age of dramatically transformed communications that we all live in, new categories, new issues, new questions. So I'm in favor of having really a reasoned national dialogue on the future of the media.
And in fact, one of the things you did call for in that speech was with regard to broadcast license renewal. And you said that since we will still need broadcasters to contribute to the democratic dialogue, we need clear standards that can be fairly but vigorously enforced. It is time to say goodbye to postcard renewal every 8 years and hello to license renewals every 3 years with some public interest teeth.
Well, that's not revolutionary. That's what we used to have. We used to have license renewal every 3 years, and we had a little list of some 12 or 14 public interest guidelines. And when it came license renewal time, we'd put the application down here next to the guidelines here and try to make a reasoned determination whether a station was making a good faith effort to do that. You didn't have to meet every one of the 14, but it was kind of a public interest judgment that was made. And I'd like to go back to something like that. Now, I think the guidelines will have changed. This is the 21st century. This isn't the 50s or 60s when we used to have that. I don't think you any longer have to say every station would be public interest guideline if you run a market report and talk about hog belly futures every morning in the 6 o'clock news, although there are some places that still want that. So you'd update it, and you'd be cognizant of the fact that we have the internet out there to help us track things and do things now. So I'd like to see us get back to that. Not onerous, not burdensome, but there's that solemn obligation that broadcasters undertake and that we are charged to safeguard at the FCC. In return for leasing your access or having access to the public airways, you agree to serve the public interest. And there are huge, huge questions coming up in this. Fast forward maybe, I don't know how many years from now, and maybe we won't have so much broadcast airwaves stations, so many. Maybe everything will have migrated, or most of them will have migrated to the internet. But your country is still faced with the same questions. How do you safeguard the public interest? If this is going to be the way we communicate with one another, and the only way is through the internet, how do we make sure that that is really serving the public? How do we make sure that it is nurturing a civic dialogue that you have to have if we're going to sustain democracy? Here you have the internet, which is, its genius is openness and dynamism, and you don't want to regulate too much, and you can't regulate if you want to. I mean, because a lot of the sites are coming from overseas, and so you got to preserve the preciousness of that internet. But on the other side of the calculation, you have to make sure that it's serving the public interest. So that's the dialogue that we need to have. That's why I'd like to see a really high-level commission charged with bringing the best and the brightest together to try to tackle some of those questions.
In the same speech that Peter was referring to, you said that there's a reform coming through the country, and
Right.
that the FCC needs to act now.
Yeah.
And I think that while the tide runs in our direction,
You bet.
as you,
Right. You almost think this was some controversial speech I gave or something.
well, so my question for you is, what can the FCC actually do in terms of hardcore actions? Because that's been a criticism of the FCC for a number of years, and I think you among them have expressed frustration about that. So what do you see are the things that the FCC can actually do once you have the new configuration installed, and how long will this window of opportunity last?
Well, what can we do? We just referred to broadcast licensing. There's something we can do. We just referred to the internet and keeping it open and dynamic. I'm a disciple of, or an enthusiast of network neutrality, maybe having a fifth principle of non-discrimination added to the 4 internet principles that we were successful in attaching to the Commission's work some years ago. How long that window of reform will remain open is really a huge question. I'm kind of like one of the neat things I got to do when I came to the FCC was develop friendships with a lot of people. One of them was historian Arthur Schlesinger Jr., the late Arthur Schlesinger Jr. But I'm a historian myself, as you probably know, and I've always been a disciple of this kind of, you get years of reform followed by years of reaction, and reform and reaction. I think we've been through a period now that you might call somewhat reactionary. Now we're into a period of reform. How wide is that window of reform open? I don't know. I think it's open wide enough for us to accomplish a lot. How long will it stay open? I don't know. That depends on lots of other circumstances, the success of the economy and everything else. So that's why I think when those windows open and you have an opportunity, you need to take advantage of them, and that's why I'm talking about let's get some stuff done now.
Well, I mean, just to point to some of the obstacles you might be facing, several hours after you gave this speech, the National Association of Broadcasters put out a statement saying they would be opposed to shortening the broadcast licensing. Mm-hmm. They are a fairly powerful force here in Washington and in the country. You are going to be facing a number of obstacles on your internet fifth principle as well. I think that what you were saying in the speech is that you see an opportunity here, and yet some of the same obstacles are still there. What's changed?
Well, far be it from me to give advice to trade associations or anybody else, but I think if I was out there and I realized that we were in a period where change is possible and some things could be coming our way, I think I would opt to be part of the dialogue. I would step up to the plate. I would go down to the FCC and start talking about how we can come together and reason together and fashion something, as I said before, that would be reasonable and viable and achievable and not burdensome, but yet advance the ball of the public interest a little bit. The same thing on net neutrality and fifth principles. And I have found folks that are willing, and even some of the big telephone companies, to start talking about it a little bit. So I think that's good and much to be desired.
Well, one of the changes that is coming, Chairman Copps, is the digital transition. And we're just a day or two away from a soft test. How many people are going to be affected by that soft test, and what do you expect to learn from it?
Well, we have, probably something close to 60% of the stations in the United States that have not fully transitioned, yet. Most of the people in the United States live in markets that are not completely transitioned. So this is going to be, it's kind of the last chance to do a really sizable effort, a major effort to see how things are going.
Prior to June 12th.
This is just 3 weeks out from June 12th, and we can test a lot of things, not only the degree to which people have hooked up their converter boxes and got their antennas, and are they getting the signal and all of that. But how is our call center operation working? We really want that teed up. We're going to have close to 4,000 operators on duty when we get to June 12th and the days preceding and the days following. We won't have that many on the soft test that's taking place this week, but we'll have plenty, and we'll have it open 24/7, so that'll be good. We'll be able to see in days after if this spiked a real run on converter boxes. Hopefully we've got enough of those in the pipeline, and are they available? So we'll be able to do that. We'll be able to tell people that help is available when they need it. There's a lot of vulnerable populations out there, senior citizens, folks with disabilities, people for whom English is not the primary language. So a lot of these folks haven't maybe gotten the message as readily as others, so we want those folks to understand that help is available, that they can call. We're going to be able, in hundreds of thousands of cases with the resources that we've assembled, actually to go into people's homes and help them. We've got walk-in centers in hundreds of venues around the country. So we want to make sure people know all of that. We want to test the system, and it's really the last chance. It's really a good test run, the last test run before June 12th.
Is there any thought that there might be another delay after June 12th?
There's none in my mind. I think it's zero, and I usually hesitate to predict Congress. I don't think that's ever good to do. I think there's zero chance of June 12th being extended. Speaking
of the soft tests, the broadcasters are shutting off their analog signals for 2 to 5 minutes. Is that enough time? There have been other studies that have said the analog signals need to be shut off for up to 10 minutes for people to really understand what's actually happening.
Well, I hope so. These things, you try to do what's achievable, and we're trying to get folks voluntarily to do this. So I think 5 minutes will be very helpful. Would I prefer 10? Probably, but is 5 better than 2 or 1? Absolutely. Yeah. A lot of the tests in the past have just been for a minute or so. But in 5 minutes, you can kind of look at that set, and maybe you got time to run upstairs to the bedroom or down to the den and make sure your sets are working.
You have 60% of broadcasters participating in this. What are the 40% that aren't participating?
No, I didn't say broadcasters. I was talking about the numbers of stations that have transitioned and haven't transitioned.
What the others that aren't participating, have they explained to you their hesitation on that?
No, it's a voluntary thing, and maybe they think they're ready or whatever. I'm opting in favor of more. I'd like to see everybody participate in this, because it's not just testing what the broadcast situation is and all of that, but it's an opportunity to inform and to educate and really get the word out one last time.
Fawn Johnson, next question.
Switching topics.
Sure.
Which I think is one of the things that you are also working on at the FCC. You have just started a national broadband plan that is partly dictated to you by Congress from the economic recovery package. If you can talk a little bit about how the FCC's actions will complement the stimulus grant money that's going out of agencies already, will your actions come too late, or is there a way that you can work together?
Well, first of all, let me say I am just as enthused as I can be that this country is finally going to develop a national broadband plan. We're probably the only industrialized country on the face of God's green earth that doesn't have some kind of a broadband strategy and a broadband plan. And again, we were in this mindset for too many years that, oh, this will all just take care of itself. The market will get broadband out everywhere and anywhere, and that didn't happen. So now the President, the Congress have seen the need and directed the development of a plan. And better news for me, because I've been pushing this for so long, they've actually charged the FCC with being at the epicenter of putting this plan together. So I think you have to look at, we're in a situation, we're coming into this late, we're way behind in broadband. So there's a need to do something now, and there's a need to do something now, not just on broadband, but as an economic stimulus generally. So I think that's the rationale for having these grants that'll be going out of NTIA and going out of RUS. And we've been consulting with both of those agencies and sharing the expertise we have so that those can be successful projects. But to me, the even bigger part of this game is developing that long-term strategy where we really sit down, we develop the record, We do the mapping. We find out the true reality of the situation right now. Who's got broadband, who doesn't, what do they have, where are they getting it from, what are the speeds, what are the prices they're paying, and all of that stuff. Really get ourselves informed, really be the data collection center like nobody else is for understanding where we are with broadband and then developing a strategy. And it's the biggest thing that's come to the FCC, certainly since I've been there. Certainly since the Telecom Act of 1996, and if we do our job right, it'll be the biggest thing that we've ever done, because this is the central infrastructure challenge of the early part of the 21st century, to get this stuff out. It's just as important as in the early part of our country when we built roads and canals and turnpikes and bridges, and then railroads, and more recently highways, when we all came together, federal, state, local, public sector, private sector, to do those things and build our infrastructure. Did the same thing with telephone service, plain old telephone service, rural electricity. That's the way we've always built infrastructure in this country, working together and pulling together in partnership. But again, somehow we got in this kind of weird mindset that we didn't have to do that here. We could just ignore all those generations and years of American history, and suddenly the stuff would just blossom up and nobody'd have to worry about it.
Well,
go ahead.
Speaking of that, I guess that's one of the questions that certainly in industry out there is how do you view the internet? Is it the same thing as a utility, or is it something different? And should it be regulated as a utility? Should there be access like there would be for utilities? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think we've teed up lots of questions in this notice of inquiry, and that's well and good, and we'll have responses on those. But I just look at it as essential infrastructure. You've got to have this stuff to be competitive as a human being, to be informed, to create opportunity for yourselves, and we need it as a country to be competitive. This isn't just some super liberal, do-gooder kind of social theory, I don't think, that I'm espousing. This is about competition for the country. We are paying a price in billions and billions of dollars every year and not having a small business in this country. There's so much creativity and innovation out there in little towns as well as big cities. But if you're trying to start, if you're a woman out in somewhere in South Dakota or Wisconsin or Montana or something like that, trying to start a small business, and you're on dial-up internet, or maybe you don't have it at all, how in the world are you going to compete and do the things that you need to do, not just in this country, but internationally too? So it's just so essential that we have this. And again, I hope it's not just regulation versus deregulation, but can we find a way to make this open, dynamic technology run with hopefully a minimum of burdens on it, but again, cognizant of the fact that it has large social and economic purposes that need to serve the public interest. And that's the navigational challenge we have.
This is the Communicators program on C-SPAN. Our guest this week is Acting FCC Chairman Michael Copps, and Fawn Johnson of Dow Jones Newswires is also here to join in the questioning. Chairman Copps, what's the difference between chairman and acting chairman?
More work, maybe in a way for the acting chairman, I don't know, because you don't have time to assemble all of the resources, and I have a fantastic team, but I suppose somebody who's coming in for the longer term has a little more leisure to put resources together and figure out where he's going. But
you've been in the position longer than you thought.
But the big difference is when you're acting chairman, you have to be cognizant that somebody else is coming after, that there are big questions. We're going to have, several new members of the FCC, and a lot of these decisions that we're going to be making are going to be long-term decisions, so they have to have the buy-in of a new and the full commission. So we're teeing a lot of stuff up. We're doing a lot of stuff too, but some of the larger issues teeing up. The chairman will be able to move ahead on those at his speed, and it's a little more difficult to do some of those issues when you're acting chairman. But we're still acting, to underline the acting and chairman.
Do you know how much longer you'll be in this position?
No, I have no idea.
Have you had a chance to chat with FCC chair nominee Julius Genachowski or Mignon Clyburn, who's also been nominated
just
for
to congratulate them on the phone and a brief visit with Julius, which was largely just getting to know each other socially. We don't know each other well.
I'm curious, in your tenure as acting chairman, which has gone probably longer than you thought and could go on a few more weeks at least, what else can you do? I mean, I get your daily digest every day, and there's the business of the FCC is going forward, but what else can you do from a policy standpoint?
Well, there's no lack of candidates for action out there. A lot of issues are teed up. We're trying to move ahead, as you know, with the shameful state of minority and female ownership of our broadcast properties. We're working on that. We've got outstanding issues on PEG channels and what's happening to our public and education and governmental challenges as we go into a digital world. Special access, tower siting, there's lots of things that are coming down the pike, and those are things that the Commission can and I think will be dealing with. But we'll also, you know, once we get this DTV transition mostly behind us, I think we'll be able to range a little more broadly in some of those things. The broadband piece is already all-encompassing, and the bureaus are really working hard on that. It's going to be a tremendous amount of work. You probably saw the NOI, the Notice of Inquiry we put out, and it asked literally hundreds and hundreds of questions.
And then asked people to ask more questions.
Right, and it asked people, that was my contribution to it. I said, if we haven't asked all the questions, let's make sure that we have a little encouragement there and think up questions of their own. So we have, it's like a funnel. We have all of this huge flow of information that's going to be coming into the FCC. But here's the trick. When it comes out of that funnel, you have to have a pragmatic, workable, achievable, makes good sense policy. And how do you do that? I don't think you do it by opening up every single facet and semicolon and phrase in the Telecommunications Act of 1996 that everybody has been fighting about in the courts, at the Commission, and in Congress for the last 13 years. Because if we do that, we're not going to get a broadband strategy, and the country urgently needs a broadband strategy. Now, there are some things inevitably that you have to take up. You have to talk about universal service and things like that, and we'll do that. But that's going to be the work of Art here, of trying to assemble a really workable strategy.
Well, but I guess one of the things I'm interested in is how much you can do now versus and how much of that has to wait until you get the next FCC assembled.
Well, on the broadband, we are full speed ahead on all fronts, and you know we will get the processes going. We're going to have to start the mapping. We're going to have to start the consumer surveys. These all take a incredible amount of time. The legislation instructs us, and I think this is wonderful, to do some international comparisons. For years I've been down there saying, why don't we look at what other countries are doing to get broadband out? Not that we have to ape what other countries and different economies and cultures are doing, but maybe there's some lessons to learn. So the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act says to the FCC, go to a minimum of 75 markets in 25 different countries and find out what's going on and what the reality of the situation is and how they did it. So I think that's great, but we got to start that right now. That can't wait on anybody else. And even then, it's going to be difficult to get it all done. One of the other things I've been doing, by the way, is we have a report due this very week to the Senate Agriculture Committees, which was commissioned to the FCC almost a year ago on rural broadband. Now that's before there was a President Obama. That's before there was a national commitment to broadband. That's before there was an American Recovery and Reinvestment Act. So we're not going to be able to present that entirely comprehensive kind of policy, but we've been working on that too, to just try to describe the parameters, identify some of the problems in getting broadband to rural America, and some of the opportunities too.
But do you not find it potentially frustrating that possibly 2/3 of the stimulus broadband money will have been spent by the time the FCC reports on what you view as the national strategy?
Well, I don't find it frustrating. It's probably, in an ideal world, less than totally what you would want to have. But as I said before, as we live in the world we live in, we've got an economic mess in our hands now. There's a need to stimulate the economy, and broadband is one way to do that. But in my view, at least, this is kind of a down payment on what we're going to be doing with the National Broadband Plan. I mean, that's going to be a look at how do you get this infrastructure not out to a number of projects around the country. How do you get it out to every citizen of this country, no matter who they are, where they live, or what the individual circumstances of their life may be? To my mind, this comes closest. This is a necessity for people, and we really have to take seriously our charge to come up with a strategy to get it out to everybody, because it's not broadband for broadband, and that's why I'd like to see the terms of the debate shift a little bit, and I think they are. It's broadband for all of these other issues we're talking about. I was down at the White House at a meeting the day before yesterday, and they were talking about smart grids. Well, that smart grid's not going to exist without, obviously, being closely dovetailed with communications. It's not just medical records, but health delivery generally. It's education. It's public safety. It's all of these things. Almost every challenge that this country really faces, to one degree or another, depends upon our success in building this infrastructure for the 21st century.
There are a number of reasons why some of the areas in the country don't have internet access, and it's largely because there's not a business right. reason for it. Do you anticipate that going forward there will be areas of the country that will never have a business case for broadband, and that will require
that might not have the traditional business case? Yes, and we're going to have to look at other incentives to get it built out there. Yes, hopefully most of this is a public-private endeavor. This has got to be a partnership level. Government obviously can't build this infrastructure and get it out there all by itself. And the private sector isn't going to go to places, some of those places that you mentioned. So what we so desperately need is, yes, the private sector as the lead locomotive in this, but fueled by visionary and far-seeing public policy. And that's what I'm arguing we always had in the past when we build infrastructure. We never had universal consensus on it, and we had terrible fights about where we're going to build railroads and internal improvements and all that. But at the end of the day, we found a way to do it, and I am hopeful and increasingly confident that at the end of the day here, belatedly, we will find a way to get this infrastructure built too.
You mentioned you were at the White House, Mr. Chairman. With whom do you work at the White House for policy direction?
Well, this was really a cabinet level thing, and I had the pleasure of being there with Secretary Locke from Commerce and Secretary Chu from Energy, and some representatives from other agencies. We were meeting with about 150 representatives of the private sector from the electrical and utility industries, to try to gauge what the challenges and the opportunities and the needs were to get the smart grid built.
Final question.
What will be your role in the commission once we have a full chairman and a full commission?
Just what it's always been. I will be there talking about the issues that I think are hugely important to the future of the country, in media and telecommunications and broadband, and doing my level best within the commission and outside the commission to inform the American people about those issues and make sure they have input and that we address them. It's an exciting place to be. These are the issues that are really determining the future of the country right now, so I couldn't think of a neater place to be.
Michael Copps is the acting chairman of the Federal Communications Commission. Thank you for being on the Communicators.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.